On October 12, 1972, a chartered airplane took off from Uruguay, heading to Santiago, carrying members of a rugby team along with their families and friends, a total of 45 passengers. Normally, it only takes about 3 hours to fly from Uruguay to Santiago, but this route passes through the massive Andes Mountains, which would become a huge obstacle for the passengers. On October 12th, a storm hit the mountains, preventing the plane from continuing. The pilots decided to wait for the storm to pass and try again the next day. On October 13th, at 2:18 p.m., the plane took off again. The aircraft was approaching Santiago but was still over the mountains. As it descended, it encountered severe turbulence, and thick clouds surrounded the plane, making it difficult to see anything. When the plane finally broke through the clouds, the pilots realized they were dangerously close to a massive rock face. In a panic, they tried to pull the plane up to avoid the mountain, but it was too late. The tail of the plane struck the mountain, ejecting 3 passengers. Moments later, the left wing broke off, and more passengers were ejected. All that remained was the front portion of the plane, which crashed onto a glacier and slid until it came to a stop. The cockpit was completely destroyed, and both pilots died instantly. Miraculously, 33 out of the 45 passengers survived the crash, but many were injured, and they had no idea where they were. This was just the beginning of their painful survival story.
An old transport plane crashed in the Andes Mountains. 45 persons were aboard, given up for dead.
Survival fascinates people.
All of the passengers were given up for dead.
It became known as the miracle of the Andes.
After the crash, only 2 people, Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino, were relatively uninjured. Both were medical students, so they immediately began tending to the injured passengers. Among the seriously injured was Fernando Parrado, who fell into a coma due to a skull fracture. Meanwhile, within an hour of the plane's disappearance, the Chilean Air Search and Rescue Service was alerted. 4 planes were deployed to search for the survivors, but they found nothing. The problem was that the plane was white, and it had crashed in an area surrounded by snow, making it almost impossible to spot. That freezing night, 5 injured survivors couldn't withstand the cold and died. The remaining survivors used the plane's wreckage as a shelter to stay warm. The next day, October 14th, 11 planes from Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay joined the search operation, but they too found nothing. The survivors tried to signal for help by writing SOS on the plane's roof using lipstick, but soon realized they didn't have enough lipstick to write all the letters. They then tried to create a large X in the snow using suitcases, hoping that search aircraft would spot it, but that also didn't work. That day, they saw 3 planes fly overhead, but their attempts to get noticed failed. On October 15th, the remaining survivors realized they needed water to stay alive. One of the passengers, Fido Strauch, figured out a way to melt snow into water using a metal sheet as a solar collector. However, they faced another problem: snow blindness, a condition caused by the sun's ultraviolet rays reflecting off the snow, which can damage the eyes. On October 21st, 8 days after the crash, the rescue teams gave up. After 142 hours of searching, the operation was officially called off. During this time, one of the survivors found a transistor radio in the plane. They managed to get it working and learned that the search had been called off. This radio only allowed them to listen, not to send messages. By the 11th day after the crash, their food was completely gone, and some survivors started eating parts of the plane, like cotton from the seats and leather, but this only made them sicker. With no other options left, they made a shocking decision: they would have to eat the bodies of their dead friends and relatives to survive.
We have to eat, and the only proteins are the dead bodies of the people that were in this plane.
Some initially refused, but 2 days later, with no other choice, they too began eating human flesh. Things couldn't seem to get worse, but on October 29th, as they slept in the plane, an avalanche struck, burying 8 more survivors in the snow and killing them.
Roberto, you had it. You're going to die. That's it. A very nice sensation of heat between my legs because I was peeing on myself and saying, that's it.
For the next 3 days, the remaining survivors were trapped in cramped conditions. When the weather cleared, they emerged and realized they were on their own. No one was coming to rescue them. Canessa, Parrado, and Vizintin were among the strongest survivors, so the group decided to send them out to find help. Their first priority was to figure out their location. Before the crash, the co-pilot had mentioned passing over the town of Curicó, so they guessed that if they walked west, they would reach Chile. However, this guess was far from correct. In reality, the co-pilot didn't know their exact location either. On November 15th, the 3 set out to find help, and after a few hours of walking, discovered the tail section of the plane. Inside, they found some food, clothes, medicine, and a 2-way radio, which could send and receive messages. They tried to get the radio working for several days, but it didn't work, so they continued walking west. On December 11th, 59 days after the crash, another avalanche struck, killing 3 more survivors.
I was trapped completely by the snow in the avalanche, and it's the most deadly silence you may imagine. I couldn't move.
Only 16 people remained. Canessa and Parrado believed they were only a few kilometers away from help, so they packed enough food for 3 days and set out again. They had no compass, no map, and no climbing experience. At such high altitudes, the air is thin and oxygen becomes scarce, but despite these challenges, they kept going. After 4 days of walking, they realized how wrong their estimate had been. Running low on food, Vizintin decided to return to the crash site, while the other two continued on, hoping to need less food. Canessa and Parado kept hiking, and after several days they reached a valley where they found a stream. On the other side of the stream, they saw 3 men on horseback. One of the men saw Parado and shouted, "Tomorrow I'll come." The next day, the man returned with paper and a pencil, which he threw to Parado. Parado wrote on it, "I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am from Uruguay. My friends are at the crash site. We are in trouble. We don't know where we are. Please help us." The man read the note and signaled that he understood. He then rode his horse for 10 hours to reach the nearest town and informed the army command, which contacted the army headquarters in Santiago. In the meantime, the farmers brought Parado and Canessa to the town of Los Maitinis by horse. As soon as people heard their story, it became international news. Army officers took Canessa and Parado in a helicopter to locate the crash site so the remaining survivors could be rescued. Finally, on December 22nd, the survivors were saved. This story is a lesson in hope. If you set your mind to something, nothing can stop you from achieving it. That's why this disaster is also known as the miracle of the Andes. If you liked this video, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.